Morning, Pa. What are you doing? Come here, big boy. Oh, that's a good boy. Come here. Come here. Come here. You want to headbutt me? You want to headbutt me? Morning, you guys. I'm going to talk to you today about brush goats and electric goat netting. This is all fill dirt I'm standing on. Free fill dirt. And I didn't put any seed in it. It came with a lot of demo. I've been pushing it out with a dozer to level off this portion of the yard so I can build a shop someday. And you can see it grows up 6 foot, 8 foot high with whatever dominant weed seed is in the seed bank. And there's everything. There's everything under the sun. It comes in free dirt. So how do you keep it mowed? I mean, there's my finish mower and some attachments, and it'll take over. It doesn't take long. I don't care how much rock you put down, unless you're going to spray chemical or whatever, or weed whack constantly. This stuff is going to grow and just displace you. I mean, it'll just turn back into a forest. And the fence is 3 foot high, and you can see how much higher the regen is. It's over my head. So I've got 2 goats, one San and Kiko. She's as dairy goats go, she's a cull, but she's a keeper for me. Her udder's not so good, but she puts out about 6 cups a day of wonderful milk. And then that little Billy is a boar Kiko, and we'll breed the 2 of them and see how it goes. This is what they eat. She gets a handful of feed just to get in the milk stand every day. He gets nothing for feed, and they do just fine eating on that brush. So when I do, rotations, I just move them around the yard in a circle. I've got a hot wire perimeter. This is like a 1 acre yard, and I just make paddocks in whatever size is convenient. This is the last move. Obviously, this is the next one. They've been in here 3 or 4 days. They'll defoliate. They'll strip this all down to stalks. It'll leave like a browse line. And this, like I said, it's just kind of a junkyard. Walk over there and show you what it'll look like. Once they've eaten everything, I then take a brush saw, which is a weed whacker with a circle blade on it, a brush saw or a clearing saw. I just knock down all the stalks, all the stems, and it'll pop up in clover and curly dock and grasses and stuff. And so this is some freshly pushed fill dirt. It comes with a lot of concrete and junk, and which is good. I try to use it to stabilize the bank so there's no erosion. But this is a patch of wild grape that you could not see through, and there's the browse line. So they'll just thin that right out, which is actually interesting. This brush line makes a nice privacy fence so that my neighbors don't have to look at my junk. And birds really like this. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a canopy at head high, and then there's an open forest layer on the bottom. And when I started doing this, the amount of little morning birds, the amount of bird species just exploded. I mean, I walked through here and they all flew off, but if I come here at daybreak, the birds are sitting like kind of camouflaged up in this little leafy canopy on these branches, but they've got a clear view of the ground, and they just dive bomb worms and crickets and all this other kind of stuff. So one issue, woven fence is pretty good stuff, don't get me wrong. One of its issues is when you got rocky ground, and I have, since this place is all demo and concrete chunks, the only cure that I've got has been a cordless hammer drill. So I'll carry the fence, and my son will walk around with the hammer drill, and I'll stretch the fence out, and I'll poke a stake where it needs to be, and then he'll shoot a hole, and I'll try to get the stake in. Sometimes he's got to drill it a second time because gravel will fall in it and it won't go down. But that works really good. So you just you stretch the bottom to get the bottom strand tight, and then you twist them, and the top strand will wind up. And that's how you can keep the sag out. And then anywhere that you've got a sag you can't control, or a rise where something could get under it, you just pin it down with a step in. So that works real good. One of the struggles is, what do you do when you're too long or too short? And well, before I say that, in midair and in corners, you're going to have a sagging fence no matter what you do. You need a lot of step-ins. You need a lot of step-ins to brace those corners and shore the poles up so that, you know, where you can't tie them to some real structure, they stay straight enough for you to get that top cord tight. Because if not, it'll just sag. It'll look like this. You know, you need it to stay up. And the way you do that is just $2 a piece or whatever for a step-in pole. Have extra. It never hurts. It'll kill you. You'll lose a whole herd if you don't have a $2 post, if you don't have enough of them. One sag. If you don't have enough feed in there, your animals are going to get out. So I guess I'll walk down here. Oop, almost went on my butt. That's all wet clay. So there's my perimeter fence. It was here when I moved here. This is me and my neighbor, good buddies. And you can see two strands of hot wire. And I only need one strand for the goats, but there's two to keep the neighbors' dogs. They can get their head through a 6x6 fence. So I've got it right at the attack height where they get a little jolt on the nose. I can run about 8,000 volts over to here. The charger will put out 10.5, and that'll make you do the hokey pokey. There's no question about it. It's like getting hit with a baseball bat. So this is like let me get out of the sun here. It's like my little travel lane where my power distribution comes down, and I can come off that fence anywhere I want to. But the brush in here was so thick I couldn't penetrate it. So this is after the goats have been in here and completely defoliated the lower tier. I couldn't walk through there. I couldn't see through there. It's thorns, briars, grape, just kind of impenetrable. There's no way that I could cut a hole through it that I wouldn't have the fence getting grounded. Plus, it's all full of demo, and there's a ledge there. The height of it, one of the issues with a woven fence, it doesn't do big height changes. It doesn't like angle like this. Okay, if you've got to go up a bluffy line, you're going to need to go with independent poly lines. Metal wire is fine. It'll do all the bending you want, but it's more of a permanent installation. If you're going to be doing paddock moves, that's when if you're going to do paddock moves and you've got to deal with the elevation up there is about 10 feet higher than down here, and it drops off rapidly. Mesh net, woven net is not going to handle that. If you have that problem, you're going to need to go with a poly line. So let's go look at one of the other problems. And that's when you buy a mesh, you're getting a fixed length. That's one of the major weaknesses of a prefabricated Premier One is the brand I've got. Shout out to Premier One. No complaints. They make a great product. The COVID thing has made it kind of expensive and hard to get, as everybody suddenly tries to put together a herd. So how do you anchor it to your intersection? Well, this portion here is insulative. You could touch it right there. The wires here have a metal braid in there, so if that touches any metal, it's going to ground. I use my jumper link right here and just hook it on. That's how I get power into the fence. Up here, just a bungee cord. Put a block of wood if you have to keep it spaced away if needed. I don't have any problems with breakouts. And here's why. There's no lack of food. Look at all that browse. If you've got some animals breaking out of your fence, you don't have a fence problem. You have a feed problem. The animal's got feed. It wants to stay in there. These goats accept that this fence is their sanctuary. They go where it goes. They stay inside of it. It excludes anything that they don't like from coming in, which I've got a bunch of dogs, and they get along now. But in the beginning, the dogs were a definitely a high pressure. I could probably put the dogs and the goats together now. I do. I let the goats out once in a while when I'm changing paddocks now. I just turn them free, let them roam around the yard, eat what they want. And the dogs don't really mess with them. They kind of actually play. But, you know, I wouldn't leave them like that overnight or anything. So what do you do when you've got the fence too long, too short? If it's too long, let's say I had 3 extra segments beyond what I needed right there, I could double it back. I could fold it back, and so it would be like, instead of this being the terminal post, it would be one of the intermediate posts. So I'd have it fold and come right back, and there'd be another post here, another post, you know, right here, and maybe the third one would end right there. And I'd have to do a little work to wind up the slack so that it doesn't lay on the ground and ground out. But you can use step-in poles to hold your, you can see here, I put the clip on the opposite side of the mesh. All you need is to hold up the top. You don't need to clip every one of them, and if you do, it's a pain in the butt to get it off. So I just hold the bottom, that bottom wire there, so they can't lift up. You don't have any electricity in this black strand. Your electric starts in your first horizontal rung. It's not, on this fence, it's not in the verticals, but it's on all the horizontals. All I need is the thing held down at the bottom and held up at the top. So that's how I do it, and it's easy to pop it out and pull that thing up. But you definitely need those step-ins. Now up here, I've got the situation where no matter what I did, I could not get, I could not get this one segment to go where I needed. I mean, I rounded the corners, you know, I stretched as tight as I could. I didn't have any inefficient zigzaggy. It took me several tries. I kept trying to lengthen this. But if it's a 100-foot long kit, that's it. That's what you got. And it's not always going to work with your layout. You guys like that? Huh? You making me some milk? What a good girl you are. You'll see that they do lay brush onto your fence. They're going to lay stuff on your fence. They don't mean to. It's just the consequence of moving around. And that's stuff that touches, it's going to ground out. It's going to land on your fence, and it's going to drop the voltage. They still shouldn't be breaking out. This fence isn't on right now. Much of the time, this fence stays off, so that I can go over it without getting whacked. And they don't challenge it. This is home for them, as long as they've got lots of browse. When you start running out, then they start saying the grass is greener on the other side. That's because it is. When the grass is truly greener on the other side, your animals are going to start getting out. So just don't let that happen. Move them before the grass is, you know, took down. Move them before they run out of brush. Now, up here, the issue that I had, you can see I'm having to drill through a coarse gravel driveway. And that's what the hammer drill is about. Up here, the problem was that I couldn't make it to my perimeter fence. So what I had to do was put in a steel post. And then the problem you can run into is that the steel post, you know, I wrapped a steel wire, just temporary, hooked it into my perimeter fence, hooked it into this post, just a scrap of extra, right, and I hammered this post in right where the fence stretched to. The issue is that these loops right here, and these, you know, that's ground and that's hot. So what do you got in between here? You got a big spark plug, that gap right there. That can jump across if it gets too close. If this slides down, I was losing 19 volts. I had zero juice in the fence because it was touching and it wasn't making any noise. When I finally found it and moved it away, it was a big electrode, you know, spark jump in that gap. So what you need to do when you run into this situation is you just get some pipe insulation. It's not rocket science. I just got to put that on there. You get some foam pipe insulation from, you know, Lowe's or Home Depot, and you wrap that around there just to keep this thing spaced out so that your air gap is big enough that the energy on your fence can't jump into your ground rod. And one more thing I suggest, wherever you're backing up, say you're using this metal fence, say you got an old rickety metal fence with holes and you're going to run standoffs, I should have showed this earlier when I was down by that type of fence, but when you're going to run, you know, say 5-inch standoffs to keep them from challenging the old metal fence, if you can use this as a ground. So you string your hot wire out on the insulators, and then you weave a ground wire through the whole metal fence. You can wrap it around a pole every once in a while. Every 50 or 100 feet, take a stub of wire and run it and stick it in the ground. Just force in 10 inches or so, however many inches you can push into the dirt. Force that in. Now you're going to run that wire all the way back to your charger. When I use my tester, if I'm standing there and if I'm just standing on the ground and I test that hot wire, I'll get, you know, let's say 7,500 volts. If I hold one hand on the back fence and then I hold my other hand on the meter and I test that wire, I'll have 800 to 1,000 volts more. 1,000 volts is a substantial increase to the pain of a fence, and pain is what trains. If you got a weak fence, they're going to be challenging it all the time if they want out. If you've got a serious kung fu fence, they're going to get 2 or 3 hits and say, forget it, I don't want none. So making your whole woven fence into a living ground that, you know, that's only inches away, you want continuity all the way back to the charger. That's going to make a huge difference in the consistency of the voltage on your fence, so that, you know, it doesn't matter if the ground dries out. I don't know if you know, if you're in a drought, there's no moisture in the ground. The conductivity of the soil decreases, so you start losing ground, meaning you're just not going to get the voltage, you're not going to get the spark that you would compared to right after a rain. Well, if you run a ground all the way out with your hot wire, you're going to have it. So it's just a hot spark might save your animal's life. If it busts out and goes and gets eaten by a pack of coyotes, it would have been a lot better off getting shocked, wouldn't it? That's all for now, you guys. Thank you and God bless.